The baby's eyes opened for the first time in 3 days, and Jared Hawthorne felt his entire world crack down the middle. Storm gray eyes. His eyes. The exact same shade that stared back at him every morning from the shaving mirror. The same eyes his father had carried, and his grandfather before him. Those Hawthorne eyes. The ones everyone in 3 counties could recognize on sight. Mr. Hawthorne. The woman's voice was a dry rasp. Weak. Trembling from the fever that had held her in its grip since the birth. "Is my son all right?" Jared's throat felt like it was full of sand. He looked down at the tiny infant cradled in his big, calloused hands. Then he looked back at the pale face of Catherine Walsh, watching him from the bed. She'd shown up on his ranch 2 weeks ago. Desperate. Alone. Her belly swollen with a child she claimed belonged to a dead man. On her finger was a thin gold band, a cheap thing that looked like it came from a pawn shop. A widow, she'd said. Husband died in a mining accident outside Denver. Left her with nothing. He hadn't wanted to hire her. A pregnant woman was no use cooking for a ranch full of rough cattlemen. But his foreman, Pete, had pulled him aside. Pete had given him that look, the one that said Jared was being a stubborn fool. "She'll work for just room and board till the baby comes," Pete had argued. "Look at her, boss. She won't last another week on her own." So Jared had given in. Temporary charity, he told himself. Nothing more. He'd lost his own wife, Sarah, 3 years back. Lost her in childbirth, along with the son he never got to hold. The last thing he needed was another pregnant woman under his roof, stirring up ghosts he'd worked so hard to bury. But Catherine had kept to herself. She worked harder than she should have, and she never once asked for a single thing beyond what he'd offered. Now, staring down at this newborn boy with impossible eyes, Jared knew. Catherine Walsh was hiding a secret far bigger than he could have ever imagined. He finally found his voice. "He's fine," Jared managed to say, the words coming out rougher than he meant. "Strong and healthy. You did good." Catherine's eyes fluttered closed in relief. For a second, Jared thought she'd fallen back asleep. The fever had been a monster. Doc Morrison had ridden out from town yesterday, done what he could, but he'd warned Jared. The next 24 hours would tell the tale. Women died from childbed fever all the time. He'd sat up all night, the baby sleeping in a damn dresser drawer lined with blankets. He'd watched Catherine's face, watched for any sign she was slipping away. Slipping away just like Sarah had. He couldn't let that happen again. He wouldn't survive it. The baby made a small noise, something between a whimper and a sigh. Jared instinctively adjusted his hold, supporting the tiny head just like Doc Morrison showed him. He'd delivered this child himself 2 nights ago. His hands had shaken the whole time. Terror had flooded him as Catherine's screams filled the small room above the kitchen. Pete had sent a hand racing for the doctor, but a storm had turned the roads to mud. By the time help could arrive, it was over. The baby had come fast and furious, slipped right into Jared's unprepared hands with a sharp cry that sounded like an accusation. He'd cut the cord with trembling fingers, wrapped the boy in clean towels, and placed him in Catherine's arms. She'd looked at her son with a love so fierce it felt like something in Jared's own chest had cracked wide open. That was 2 days ago. 2 days of caring for them. 2 days of trying to run a ranch while his world spun out of control. 2 days of watching this woman who'd shown up with a lie on her lips and desperation in her eyes. But now the baby had opened his eyes, and everything had changed. "Mr. Hawthorne." Catherine's voice pulled him back. Her eyes were open again, bright with fever, laced with anxiety. "You're holding him like something's wrong. Please, tell me the truth." Jared looked at her. Really looked at her. For maybe the first time. She was close to his age, maybe 30. Dark blonde hair was plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her cheekbones stood out too sharp. There was something familiar about her face, something that tickled the edge of his memory, but he couldn't place it. "Nothing's wrong with him," Jared said slowly, picking his words like he was crossing a minefield. "He's perfect." "Then why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" "Because I have," Jared thought. "I'm looking at a ghost of myself." He moved closer to the bed, holding the baby out so Catherine could see his face clearly. "When's the last time you really looked at his eyes?" Catherine frowned. "They've been closed since he was born. I thought that was normal." "It is normal," Jared confirmed, "but he opened them just now. Take a good look." Catherine stared down at her son. Jared watched her face. He saw the flicker of confusion, then the slow, dawning horror. The color drained from her already pale cheeks. Her breathing quickened, and it had nothing to do with the fever. "Oh, God," she whispered, the words barely audible. "Oh, no, you weren't supposed to notice." She looked up at him, her eyes wide. "Not yet. Not until I was gone." The admission hit Jared like a fist to the gut. "You knew," he said, his voice flat. "You knew he'd have my eyes." Her gaze snapped up to meet his. He saw raw, animal fear in them. "I can explain. I think you'd better." Jared's voice was hard, but he kept his hold on the baby gentle. Whatever else was true, this child was innocent. Catherine struggled to sit up, wincing. Jared found himself automatically reaching out, propping pillows behind her with his free hand. She took the baby from him, clutching her son to her chest like he might be ripped away at any moment. Smart woman, Jared thought. The idea had definitely crossed his mind. "I wasn't always a widow," Catherine said quietly, her eyes fixed on the baby. "That was a lie." "I figured that much out on my own," Jared replied, crossing his arms. "What I haven't figured out is how that baby has hawthorn eyes when I've never laid eyes on you before in my life." But even as he said it, something shifted. A lock clicked open in the back of his mind. A night in Denver. 9, maybe 10 months back. He'd just closed the biggest cattle deal of his career. The buyers insisted on celebrating. There had been whiskey, lots of it. More than he'd drunk since Sarah died. The hotel bar was loud, crowded, full of smoke and lies. And there had been a woman, a serving girl, bringing drinks, smiling at him. A real smile, not the practiced kind. It had made him feel alive for the first time in years. He'd been too drunk to remember her face, too drunk to remember much of anything. Just waking up alone in his hotel room with a pounding headache and a shame that had followed him all the way home. Catherine was watching him now. He saw the exact moment she realized his memory was coming back. Her arms tightened around the baby. "Denver," Jared said, the name a whisper on his lips. "The cattle auction. You were there." "I worked at the hotel," she confirmed, tears finally spilling, tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. "I brought drinks to your table. You were celebrating. You were kind to me. Kinder than most men. When you invited me upstairs, I said yes. I knew it was wrong, but I said yes anyway." The floor dropped out from under him. "I don't remember. I know, you were drunk, very drunk. In the morning you were gone. I never expected to see you again. But then I found out I was pregnant. I lost my job. I had nowhere to go. I remembered your name from the auction papers. Jared Hawthorne, from the Lazy H Ranch outside Willow Creek. So, you came looking for me." "Why didn't you just tell me?" Jared demanded, the anger a hot knot in his stomach. "Why the lies about being a widow?" "Because I didn't want your charity," she shot back, a spark of fire in her fever-bright eyes. "I didn't want you to feel trapped, obligated. I just wanted to work, to keep my baby fed and safe, to be close to his father, even if he never knew. My plan was to leave before he was old enough for anyone to see the resemblance. That's the stupidest plan I've ever heard." "Maybe so," her voice broke. "But it was all I had. I'll leave as soon as I'm strong enough. I promise. You'll never have to see us again." The baby chose that moment to let out a wail, sharp and demanding. Catherine automatically began to rock him, making soft, shushing sounds. Jared watched them. His mind was a stampede. His heart hammered against his ribs. His carefully ordered life was burning to the ground around him. This was his son, his blood, and this woman, this stranger who wasn't a stranger, had carried that burden all alone. "We'll talk more when you're stronger," Jared finally said, backing toward the door. Right now, you need to rest. Mr. Hawthorne. It's Jared, he interrupted. I think we're past formalities, don't you? He left before she could answer. He closed the door quietly and leaned against the wall in the hallway, pressing the heels of his hands against his eyes. A son. He had a son. The boy he'd thought he'd never have, delivered into his own hands by a woman he couldn't remember. Through the door he heard Catherine's voice, soft and melodic, singing to their child. The fever must be getting worse. Her words were slurring, becoming nonsense. Denver. I'm so sorry. The auction. You don't remember. Thomas needs his papa. Can't let him know. Have to leave. Jared's blood ran cold. The fever was taking her again. He pushed off the wall and stormed downstairs to find Pete. They needed Doc Morrison back. Now. Storm or no storm. Because if Catherine Walsh died, he'd be left alone with a newborn baby. And 1,000 questions only she could answer. Doc Morrison arrived just after dawn, his horse lathered and breathing hard. Jared met him at the door, exhaustion a physical weight on his shoulders. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Not with Catherine's fever climbing and the baby crying and his own mind spinning in endless circles. She's worse, Jared said, no preamble. Delirious. Talking out of her head. The doctor nodded grimly and headed upstairs, bag in hand. Jared followed, a cold dread coiling in his gut. But when they entered the room, Catherine's eyes were open, and they were clear. The baby was nursing, and she looked up at them with a fragile hope on her pale face. The fever broke about an hour ago, she said softly. I think the worst has passed. Doc Morrison examined her anyway, checking her pulse, asking questions. Jared stood by the window, half listening, his mind snagged on Catherine's fevered words from the night before. Denver, the auction, you don't remember. But he was starting to. The memories were coming back in broken pieces, like a photograph torn and taped back together wrong. The Golden Eagle Hotel, the celebration, too much whiskey. He remembered trying to drown the loneliness that had been his constant companion since Sarah's funeral. He remembered her, the serving girl, Catherine. Pretty, with sad eyes and a cautious smile. She'd laughed at something stupid he'd said. A real laugh. It felt good to make someone laugh again. He remembered inviting her upstairs. He remembered the blur of whiskey-soaked images, her hair on the pillow, the warmth of her body, the feeling, just for a few hours, of not being completely, utterly alone. In the morning, shame had been a physical thing. It had driven him from the bed before sunrise. He'd left a pile of money on the dresser, far more than was necessary, and ridden out of Denver like the devil himself was on his heels. He'd promised himself he'd never get that drunk again. He'd kept that promise. But the damage was already done. Mr. Hawthorne. Doc Morrison's voice pulled him back. I said, she's going to be fine. The fever's broken. With rest and proper food, she should make a full recovery. That's good, Jared managed. That's real good. The doctor gave him a long look. You all right? You look like hell. Just tired. Been a long couple of days, I imagine, the doctor said, glancing from Catherine back to Jared. Delivering a baby isn't easy for anyone, especially not for a man who's lost what you've lost. But you did well. Mother and child are both healthy, thanks to you. After the doctor left, Jared lingered in the doorway, unsure what to do. Catherine made the decision for him. We should talk, she said quietly. Now. While I have the strength. Jared closed the door and took the chair by the bed. The baby, Thomas, had fallen asleep at her breast. Looking at them, Jared felt another crack in that wall he'd built around his heart. I remember Denver, he said. Not all of it, but enough. Catherine nodded. That night, you were different from the other men. You looked me in the eye when you talked to me. You asked my name. It might not sound like much, but in that line of work it meant everything. I took advantage of you, Jared said, the words like gravel. I was drunk and I took advantage. No, Catherine said firmly. I made a choice. Maybe not a wise one, but it was mine. I just didn't know there would be Consequences. You got pregnant. Yes. And when the owner found out, he fired me. Said he couldn't have pregnant girls serving drinks. Never mind that half his customers were the reason girls ended up that way. Bitterness edged her voice. I had a little money saved, but not enough. No one wants to hire a woman who's expecting. I was running out of options. So, you came looking for me? I remembered your name. She met his eyes. I heard the other ranchers talk about you. Said you ran a good operation. Treated your people fair. I thought maybe I could just get hired as a cook. I never planned to tell you. I just wanted my son to know his father's land, even if he never knew his father. Jared stared at this woman. This impossibly brave, impossibly foolish woman. He had a son. A living, breathing son. And he had no idea what to do next. 3 days passed. Then 4. Catherine didn't leave. She was still too weak, she said. The baby needed stability. Just a few more days. Jared told himself he was fine with it. Better even. He had a ranch to run. But he kept finding excuses to check on them. Bringing fresh water. Making sure the fire in her room stayed lit. And then, there were the nights. The first time Thomas woke screaming at 2 in the morning, Jared lay in his bed downstairs and tried to ignore it. She was the mother. She could handle it. But the crying went on and on. A raw, helpless sound that clawed at him. Finally he got up. He found Catherine in the rocking chair, tears streaming down her face, the baby wailing in her arms. I can't, she'd whispered, her voice choked with desperation. He won't latch. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Jared was completely out of his depth, but he remembered something Doc Morrison had said when Sarah was pregnant. Sometimes a baby just needs to be held, rocked, calmed. So he took his son from her arms. He walked the small room, talking in a low, steady voice. About the ranch, the cattle, the mountains. Miraculously, the baby quieted. After that, it became their routine. When Thomas cried, Jared would appear. He'd rock his son, change his diaper with fumbling, determined hands, and give him back to Catherine only when he was calm enough to nurse. They barely spoke during those midnight meetings. But a partnership was forming in the quiet darkness. On the 4th day, Jared came in for lunch and found Catherine in the kitchen. She was at the stove, stirring a pot of stew, the baby strapped to her chest in a makeshift sling. You should be resting, Jared frowned. I've rested enough. I need to earn my keep, she said, not looking at him. Besides, I heard Pete telling the men that if they had to eat one more of his meals, they were going to mutiny. A small smile touched Jared's lips. Pete's cooking is that bad. Women have been having babies and getting back to work since the beginning of time, she replied. I'm not special. But she was. The thought hit Jared with the force of a physical blow. She was special. She was brave and stubborn and refused to be broken. And when she held their son, something in Jared's chest that had been frozen solid for 3 years began to thaw. He didn't like it. Feeling meant risk. Risk meant loss. Stew smells good, he said, backing toward the door. It'll be ready in an hour. There's coffee. He poured a cup and sat at the kitchen table. He told himself he was just taking a break, but his eyes kept drifting to her. She hummed as she worked. Thomas made little contented sounds in response. He likes your voice, Jared observed. She smiled, the first real one he'd seen. He's easily pleased. A full belly and a warm place to sleep. Sounds like a smart kid. He gets that from his father. The words were out before she could stop them. Color flooded her cheeks. I didn't mean... It's all right, Jared interrupted. He's my son, we both know it. She turned to face him fully. What happens now, Jared, after I'm strong enough to leave? Will you want to see him? Should I send letters? Jared stared into his coffee. A week ago, his life was simple, predictable. Now he had a son he never planned for, and a woman who stirred feelings he thought were long dead. The smart thing to do was let them go. Give her money. Stay uninvolved. Stay safe. But when he looked at Thomas sleeping against his mother's chest, he knew he couldn't. I don't know what happens now, Jared admitted. But I know I can't watch you walk away and never see him again. Catherine's eyes widened. You want to be part of his life? He's my son, Jared said, the words feeling solid, true. I don't abandon what's mine. Before she could respond, the kitchen door burst open. Pete rushed in, his face flushed. Boss, we got trouble. Jared's stomach dropped. Mrs. Henderson from town just left. She saw the baby. Pete took a ragged breath. And she's got eyes in her head, same as everyone. She asked me point blank if that child was yours, and I didn't know what to tell her. The secret was out, and in a town this small, a secret like that spreads like wildfire. By sunset, the whole town knew. Mrs. Henderson had made sure of it. Jared Hawthorne's new cook, the mysterious widow, had given birth to a baby with unmistakable Hawthorne eyes. Jared sat in his study, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk. Pete relayed the rumors. They're saying she trapped you, Pete said, shifting uncomfortably. That she came here on purpose, knowing she was carrying your child. They're saying worse things too. About her character. Mrs. Henderson's telling everyone she was working at some hotel in Denver. Folks are drawing their own conclusions about what kind of work that was. She was a serving girl, Jared said flatly. I believe you, boss. But the town ain't interested in the truth when gossip's more entertaining. Pete leaned forward. What are you going to do? I don't know yet. Well, you'd better figure it out fast. Pastor Reynolds is riding out here tomorrow morning. Says he needs to speak with you about your moral responsibility. Jared's jaw tightened. After Pete left, he climbed the stairs. He found Catherine sitting by the window, Thomas in her arms, staring out at the darkening sky. She'd been crying. You heard? Jared asked. It wasn't a question. One of the ranch hands' wives came by. Catherine's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. She warned me the town's talking. I've ruined you, just like I knew I would. You haven't ruined anything. Your reputation. My reputation can survive gossip. I'm more concerned about yours. And Thomas's. She looked down at their son. I'll leave tomorrow, before this gets any worse. And go where? Jared demanded. You have no money, no family, and a week-old baby. Where exactly are you going to go? I'll figure something out. I always do. No. The word was hard, final. You're not leaving. Why not? Keeping me here only makes things worse for you. Because when I look at you holding our son, something in me feels right for the first time in 3 years. Because the thought of you out there, alone, makes my chest ache with an emotion I'm not ready to name. But he didn't say that. Instead, he said, because Thomas deserves better than to grow up hearing his mother made bad choices. He deserves a chance. Her laugh was bitter. The whole town thinks I'm a fallen woman who trapped you. How is that a chance? Before he could answer, they heard a horse approaching, fast. Jared moved to the window. His stomach sank. It was his sister, Margaret, her face set in grim lines. She must have heard, Jared said. Catherine's face went pale. Oh God. Jared, I can't face her. Not tonight. But there was no avoiding it. 5 minutes later, Margaret was standing in the doorway, dust from the road on her boots, her eyes blazing. Is it true? She demanded. That woman had your baby? Her name is Catherine, Jared said evenly. And yes, Thomas is my son. Margaret's eyes swept over Catherine with pure contempt. How convenient. A mysterious widow shows up, pregnant and desperate, and suddenly you're a father. Did you even ask for proof? I don't need proof, Jared replied. I have eyes. So do you, if you'd bother to look. Margaret stalked closer, studying Thomas. The baby was awake, watching her with those unmistakable gray eyes. Jared saw the moment his sister recognized the truth. Her anger faltered, replaced by shock. Oh, Jared, she whispered. What have you done? What I'm doing now, he said, is trying to make it right. Margaret turned on Catherine. Did you plan this? Did you come here knowing you were pregnant with his child? Catherine lifted her chin. Yes, I came here knowing, but not to trap him. I just wanted to work and keep my baby safe. I never meant to tell him the truth. How noble, Margaret sneered. And what now? I'm leaving, Catherine said. As soon as I'm strong enough. That's exactly what you should do. Margaret turned back to Jared. Let her go. Give her money. This scandal will die down. But if you keep her here, if you acknowledge that child, your reputation will be ruined. You'll never be able to marry well, never be accepted in decent society again. Suddenly, Margaret's eyes narrowed. They weren't looking at the baby anymore. They were fixed on Catherine's hand, on the thin gold band on her finger. That ring, Margaret's voice was dangerously low. Where did you get that ring? Catherine's hand flew to her chest, covering the ring. It was my husband's. Liar, Margaret hissed, taking a step forward. That was my mother's wedding band. I'd know it anywhere. It was on Sarah's finger the day she was buried. The air left the room. Jared stared at the ring, then at Catherine's terrified face. It couldn't be. It was just a simple gold band. There must be thousands like it. But Margaret was already reaching out, grabbing Catherine's hand. Let me see it. No! Stop it! Catherine cried, trying to pull away. Jared stepped between them. Margaret, that's enough. Is it, Jared? His sister's eyes were wild. This woman shows up with your child, a convenient story, and my dead sister-in-law's wedding ring on her finger. Are you blind? She's not just some poor desperate girl. She's a thief, a grifter. The accusation hung in the air, uglier and more dangerous than any town gossip. Jared looked at Catherine. Her face was ashen. The fear in her eyes was now mixed with something else. Guilt. And in that moment, Jared's world didn't just crack. It shattered into a million pieces. Get out, Jared said, his voice cold enough to freeze fire. Margaret stared at him, stunned. Jared! I said get out, he repeated, not taking his eyes off Catherine. Go stay in the guest room. We'll talk in the morning. After his sister left, slamming the door behind her, the silence in the room was deafening. Thomas started to fuss, sensing the tension. Catherine automatically rocked him, her movements jerky. Jared finally turned to her. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The quiet betrayal in his tone was worse than any shout. Tell me she's lying, Catherine. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Tears streamed down her face. I can't. The words were a physical blow. He felt the air leave his lungs. He had defended her. He had started to trust her. He had started to feel something. And it had all been built on a foundation of lies. Not just one lie, but a whole web of them. Where did you get it? He asked. She finally looked at him, her expression broken. From your room. In Denver. The shame he'd felt that morning came rushing back, 10 times stronger. He'd been so drunk, so lost in his own grief and self-pity, he hadn't even noticed. Why? He whispered. Why would you do that? I was desperate, she cried, her voice cracking. I had just lost my job. I was pregnant. I had nothing. I saw it on your dresser. I know it was wrong, so wrong, but I was scared. I thought I could sell it. For food. For a place to stay. But I couldn't. Every time I tried, I felt sick. It was all I had left of that night. Of you. The story was pathetic. It was believable. And it made him sick to his stomach. He had been so lost in his own pain that he had created this disaster. He had left this woman vulnerable and desperate enough to steal from a stranger's room. So, everything, he said, the words tasting like ash. The helpless widow. The sad story. Was any of it true? The desperation was true, she whispered. The fear was true. Being pregnant and alone. That was all true. He sank into the chair, running a hand over his face. Who was this woman? He had delivered her child. He had held her. He had defended her to his own family. And he didn't know her at all. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was a liar. A thief. And the mother of his only son. The conflict tore him apart. His honor, his family name, everything he'd been raised to believe in screamed at him to throw her out. Send her away. Cut her out of his life like a cancer. But then he looked at Thomas, sleeping in her arms, completely innocent. This child was a Hawthorne. His blood. He couldn't abandon his son. Which meant he couldn't abandon her. Not completely. The weight of that realization was crushing. He was trapped. Tied to this woman by a bond of blood and a string of lies. That night, Catherine knew she had to leave. She couldn't stay. Not now. She hadn't just ruined his reputation. She had destroyed his trust. The way he had looked at her. It was a wound that would never heal. His sister had been right about her. She was a poison in this house. She waited until the whole house was silent, wrapped Thomas in every blanket she could find, and packed her few things into a worn carpet bag. Her body screamed in protest. It had only been a week since the birth, but the pain was nothing compared to the shame. She made it to the barn before the sobs broke through. She leaned against a stall door, crying for everything she was losing. The safety, the fragile hope, the kindness in Jared's eyes before she had snuffed it out. "Going somewhere?" The voice came from the shadows of the barn doorway. Jared. Fully dressed. He must have been waiting for her. "I have to leave," she said, wiping at her tears. "You know I do." "No," he said, moving into the lantern light. His face was a hard mask. "I don't know that at all. Where will you go, Catherine? It's October in Colorado. You and that baby wouldn't last 3 days." "That's not your concern." "The hell it isn't." His voice rose, sharp with frustration. "You're the mother of my child. That makes everything about you my damn concern. I won't let you sacrifice everything for me. Your sister was right. The town, the pastor, everyone thinks I'm a tramp and a thief. And they're right about the second part, aren't they?" Thomas stirred, protesting the raised voices. Catherine shushed him, her touch automatic. Jared's expression softened for a fraction of a second as he watched them. "I don't give a damn about the town," he said, his voice quieter now. "And I can handle my sister. But if you leave, if you take my son and disappear, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if he's safe, if he's warm, if he's alive. Is that what you want?" "No," she choked out. "But I don't want you to hate me. 5 years from now, when you realize what you lost because of me." He stepped closer. So close she could see the flecks of gray in his storm-colored eyes. The same eyes their son would have. "There's only one way to fix this," he said, his voice low and intense. She looked at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" "Marry me." The words were so unexpected they felt like a slap. She stumbled back a step. "No. Absolutely not." "Why not?" "Because I won't trap you. Because of a mistake in Denver. Because of a lie. Because of a theft. That's no reason to build a life. You deserve better than a wife you're shackled to out of duty." "What makes you so sure it would be a trap?" His voice was raw. "What makes you think I haven't spent this last week watching you with our son, and realizing that maybe what happened in Denver wasn't just a mistake? Maybe it was the only good thing that's happened to me in 3 years, even if I was too drunk and stupid to see it?" She stared at him, her heart hammering. "You don't mean that. You can't. Not after tonight." "I lost my wife," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "I lost my child. I thought that was it for me. Worked the ranch until I died. Then you showed up. And everything, from the very first second, has been chaos. It's been lies and fevers and secrets. But it's also been alive. This house has been alive again." He reached out, not to touch her, but just holding his hand in the space between them. "I don't trust you, Catherine. Not right now. I look at you and I don't know what's real and what's a performance. But I know that boy is my son. And I know I won't have him branded a bastard for the rest of his life. I won't have his mother run out of town as a whore and a thief. This wasn't a proposal born of love. It was a business transaction, a desperate, cold-blooded solution to an impossible problem. We'll tell people we were married in Denver," he laid it out, his voice all business. "Quietly. Because I was still grieving Sarah. You came west to the ranch and here we are. It's a lie that protects our son. We make it legal now, and it stops being a lie. It just becomes the truth, slightly rearranged. She looked down at Thomas, sleeping peacefully, unaware his entire future was being decided in a dusty barn. She thought of a life on the road, cold, hunger, fear, and she thought of a life here, a home, a father for her son, stability. "I'm scared," she whispered. "What if you wake up every day for the rest of your life and regret it? What if you look at me and only see the woman who lied to you and stole from you?" He finally reached out, his calloused thumb brushing away a tear on her cheek. "Then we'll work through it. Or we won't. But Thomas will have my name. He'll have this ranch. He'll be safe. That's the deal." He wasn't offering her love. He wasn't offering her forgiveness. He was offering her son a future. How could she refuse? "What do you say, Catherine?" His hand rested gently on their son's head. "Will you marry me?" she whispered. "Yes." He leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't soft or careful. It was hard and desperate. A seal on a contract. A promise of a battle to come. When he pulled away, she was crying again. But this time, she had no idea if they were tears of relief or terror. The next morning, Pastor Reynolds arrived, his face primed for a lecture on morality. He found Jared and Catherine in the parlor, Thomas sleeping in a cradle between them. "We're getting married," Jared said, cutting him off before he could start. "This Sunday, if you're available." The pastor blinked, thrown completely off his script. "I see. Well, that is the proper course of action. But the timing. The child is already born." "We were married in Denver," Catherine said, her voice surprisingly steady. It was quiet. Jared was still mourning his first wife. The pastor looked skeptical, but Jared's stare was made of iron. "Are you marrying us or not?" "Of course, Sunday it is." After he left, Jared squeezed her hand. A brief, impersonal touch. First hurdle. The second came that afternoon. Margaret returned. She stood on the porch, her expression unreadable. "May I see the baby?" Catherine's first instinct was to say no, the cruelty from the night before still a fresh wound. But Jared gave a slight nod. She brought Thomas out. Margaret sat stiffly in the porch swing. Catherine placed the baby in her arms. Thomas stirred, opened his storm-gray eyes and looked up at his aunt. And then, for the first time, Thomas smiled. A real, gummy, beautiful smile that transformed his entire face. Margaret's stern expression crumbled. "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Jared. He has father's smile." She looked up at Catherine, and for the first time there were tears in Margaret's eyes. "I was cruel to you. I was trying to protect my brother. But I see now. He needs this. He needs this family. May I come to the wedding?" Catherine, shocked into silence, could only nod. The wedding was a strange, tense affair. Catherine wore a simple dress a ranch wife had altered for her. Jared wore his best suit. Thomas slept in Margaret's arms. Pete stood as Jared's witness, a worried frown on his face. When the pastor pronounced them husband and wife, Jared's kiss was brief, a public sealing of their private contract. It didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like a sentence. The town didn't know what to think. Some, like Mrs. Henderson, whispered that Jared Hawthorne had been forced into it, trapped by a conniving woman. Others argued he was doing the honorable thing. But everyone was watching them, waiting for the sham marriage to fall apart. The first months were a quiet hell. They were polite strangers living in the same house. They slept in the same bed, a cold, empty space between them. They moved around each other, careful not to touch, careful not to talk about anything that mattered. Their conversations were about the ranch, the weather, the baby. Never about Denver. Never about the ring, which now sat in a box in Catherine's drawer, replaced by a new, plain band. Jared was a good father. He was patient and gentle with Thomas. He still got up for the midnight feedings, and in the dark of the nursery, they were almost a team again. But when the sun came up, the walls went back up. Catherine threw herself into her work. She cooked and cleaned and mended, trying to earn her place, trying to be the wife he was stuck with. She saw the way he looked at her sometimes, when he thought she wasn't watching. a flicker of something she couldn't name. Resentment? Regret? Or was it something else? She knew he didn't trust her. Why would he? And she discovered someone else didn't trust her either. A rival rancher, Silas Blackwood, a man who had always been jealous of the Hawthorne's success, began stopping by. At first, it seemed friendly, offering condolences for Sarah, then awkward congratulations on the new wife and baby. But his eyes were like a snake's. "Quite a surprise, your marriage," Silas said to Jared one afternoon on the porch, while Catherine was hanging laundry nearby, pretending not to listen. "A man like you, with your standing, marrying his cook, must have been quite the whirlwind romance." "What I do in my house is my business, Silas." Jared's voice was cold. Of course, Blackwood said with a slick smile. "It's just, people talk. They wonder. A woman shows up out of nowhere. A baby with Hawthorne eyes appears 9 months after the Denver auction. It's a story that writes itself. And some stories can be bad for business. Bankers get nervous." The threat was veiled, but it was clear. Blackwood was using the scandal as a weapon. He wanted to see Jared fall. And Catherine knew she was the stone tied around his neck, pulling him down. The pressure from Blackwood got worse. A shipment of Jared's cattle was mysteriously diverted. A fence was cut, letting half a herd wander off. Small things, impossible to prove, but they were adding up. Jared grew more withdrawn, the lines around his eyes deeper. One night, Catherine couldn't take the silence anymore. Thomas was asleep. The house was quiet. Jared was in his study, staring into the fire, that untouched glass of whiskey on the table beside him again. She stood in the doorway. "He's doing this because of me." Jared didn't look at her. "It's ranch business. It doesn't concern you." "Don't lie to me," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Not anymore. Silas Blackwood is trying to ruin you, and he's using me to do it. Let me go, Jared. It's not too late. You can tell everyone you found out the truth about me, that I tricked you. Annul the marriage. Send me away. The town will rally behind you. They'll see you as the victim." He finally turned to look at her, his eyes dark in the firelight. "And my son? What happens to my son?" "You can keep him," she whispered, the words tearing her apart. "You can raise him. He'll be better off. He'll have your name, this home. He won't be tied to a liar and a thief." He stood up and walked toward her, so slowly she felt like a cornered animal. He stopped right in front of her. "Is that what you think you are?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "It's what I am. It's what everyone knows I am." "I've been thinking about Denver," he said, ignoring her words. "I've been trying to remember. It's still a blur. But I remember one thing clearly. I remember being lonely. A kind of lonely that felt like a hole right through my chest. And I remember you smiled at me. And for a minute, the hole didn't feel so big." He reached out and tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear. His fingers barely brushed her skin, but a jolt went through her. "I married you for the boy," he said. "That's the truth. I married you to protect my son and my name. But that's not the whole truth anymore." She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I watch you with Thomas. I watch you work until you're ready to drop, just to prove you belong here. I see you flinch every time my sister comes over, even though she's trying to be kind now. You're paying for your mistakes every single day. Maybe it's time you let yourself be forgiven." "I don't know how," she whispered. "You start by telling me to go to hell when I shut you out," he said, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "You start by acting like my wife, not my housekeeper. You start by fighting with me, for this family, against men like Silas Blackwood." He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm not an easy man, Catherine, and I don't know how to fix what's broken between us, but I'm tired of the silence, and I don't want you to go." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness or fear, but of a tiny, fragile hope. "I don't want to go," she admitted. "Good," he murmured, and then he kissed her. It wasn't like the kiss in the barn, born of desperation. And it wasn't like the cold kiss at their wedding. This one was different. It was searching, it was hesitant, it was a question. And when she kissed him back, it was an answer. It wasn't a solution. It didn't erase the lies or the mistrust. But for the first time since she'd arrived at the Lazy H Ranch, it felt like a real beginning. They started to fight back. Together. When Silas Blackwood tried to convince the bank in Willow Creek to call in Jared's loan, citing the instability of his new marriage, Catherine went with Jared to the meeting. She walked in with her head held high, Thomas in her arms. She spoke to the banker not as a fallen woman, but as Mrs. Hawthorne, mistress of the Lazy H. She laid out the household books, showing him how efficiently she was running things, how their finances were stronger than ever. The banker, a man who respected legacy and strength above all, was impressed. He extended Jared's credit. When Blackwood's men tried to spook Jared's prize bull, it was Pete, the foreman, who caught them. He came to Jared, twisting his hat in his hands. "Boss, there's something I should have told you. The night Miss Catherine showed up, I recognized her." Jared stiffened. "What are you talking about?" "From Denver. I was at the Golden Eagle that night too, at a different table. I saw you two, and I saw her a few days later getting fired. The owner was a real piece of work. I felt bad for her. When she showed up here I knew why. I didn't say anything, 'cause it wasn't my place. But I've been keeping an eye out. Blackwood's been sniffing around, asking questions about her ever since she arrived. He's trying to dig up dirt." The pieces clicked into place. Blackwood wasn't just using the scandal. He was trying to create one. The final battle came during the spring roundup. Blackwood's ranch bordered the Hawthorne land, and disputes over grazing rights were common. This year, Blackwood pushed it. He moved his herd onto a piece of Hawthorne territory, claiming an old, invalid deed gave him the right. It was a clear provocation. A fight was brewing. Jared rode out to meet him, not with fists, but with the law. He had the town sheriff with him, and a surveyor. And Catherine. She rode beside him, no longer just the cook or the woman he was forced to marry. She was his wife. His partner. Blackwood laughed when he saw them. "Come to hide behind your wife's skirts, Hawthorne." "No," Jared said calmly. "I've come to watch the sheriff arrest your men for trespassing." The confrontation was tense. Blackwood's men were armed and spoiling for a fight. But Jared stood his ground. He presented his deed. The surveyor confirmed the boundaries, and the sheriff ordered Blackwood's men to stand down. Blackwood, furious and humiliated, was exposed as a bully and a cheat. His power in the valley was broken. That night, the victory felt real. The threat was gone. They had faced it together and won. They lay in bed, the space between them finally gone. Jared was tracing patterns on her arm. "I love you," she said into the darkness. Simple. True. He went still for a moment, then pulled her closer. "I love you too," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I think I have for a while now. I was just too stubborn and proud to admit it." "Me too," she confessed. He kissed her forehead. "We have a lot to make up for." "We have a lifetime," she replied. Spring brought new life to the ranch, and to the Hawthorne family. Catherine was pregnant again. This time, there were no secrets, only joy. Jared was there for all of it, fussing over her, treating her like she was made of precious glass. Their daughter was born in the heat of July. A smooth delivery, with Doc Morrison in attendance and Jared holding her hand the whole time. They named her Sarah. It was Catherine's idea. A way to honor the woman who had come before, to heal the last of the wounds from the past. Margaret cried when she heard the name, and hugged Catherine tight. "You are a good woman, Catherine Hawthorne." That summer, Thomas took his first steps, toddling across the parlor floor into Jared's waiting arms. He was talking now. Papa and Mama. His storm-gray eyes bright with joy. One evening, Catherine sat nursing baby Sarah, watching Jared play with Thomas on the floor. She looked around their home, at this life they had built not on a mistake, but on a second chance. A year ago, she had been alone and desperate. Now, she had everything. "What are you thinking?" Jared asked, catching her eye. "That I'm happy," she said. "That I love our life." He stood, scooped up Thomas, and came to sit beside her. Their little family finally whole, finally at peace. "Me too," he said, kissing her. "Me too." The past was messy. It was complicated. But it had led them here. Those storm-gray eyes that had first shocked him had become the eyes of the son he adored. The woman who had lied to him had become the woman he couldn't live without. The lie they had built their marriage on had, against all odds, become the deepest truth of their lives. He had chosen to do the right thing for his son, and in doing so, had found a love greater than he had ever thought possible. If you enjoyed this story of secrets and second chances, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tales you won't want to miss.